from you how we can start living aligned with that greater aspect of ourselves, that more spiritual, divine aspect of ourselves, our higher self, where we find unconditional love very much a part of that. And last time you described how we can start tapping the unlimited potential we have within us. And so this time we're going to be talking about living now, creating now, and I take that title from chapter 6 in your book, Unconditional Love, An Unlimited Way of Being, which this talk is broadly based on. And I'll start by reading the paragraph which you used to introduce this chapter, and we'll take it from there. In every effort made manifest, there is a beginning step. However large or small, a movement forward is a dream come true. Within each desire is the possibility for it to become a reality. We only have one moment to live this life, and that is the eternal now. Be in the present and make the most of everything. Let love draw the picture and joy paint the canvas. Live as if it were the last moment, while ever knowing that it is just the beginning. So love, unconditional love, is really going to be the basis of our lives then, in alignment with this higher aspect of ourselves.
Unconditional love, as I came to define it as an unlimited way of being, is how I form the basis of my new found life. Mm-hmm. And the reason I share it this way is, again, myself, very practically and specifically speaking, I had no understanding of love in any concept or any form, only vague notions of outer descriptions, moments of, heightened joy and plenty of moments of what we would have heartbroken, in our old cultural dialogue, because I simply didn't understand. I didn't understand what love was about. And in my exploration, in my self-growth, my self-awareness process, it's very fascinating to me that love became so prominent as the key to everything else. Mm-hmm. That love, for me, was the place to focus my attention on. It wasn't about just positive thinking, which was very prominent in the beginning part. It was like there had to be more. It was, wasn't enough just to think positively or to embrace my inner child or to, know that my creativity was there, because it still had a sense of meaninglessness in the big scheme of things. Love was this aspect that was unifying with everything. And how I, came to the unlimited way of being, as I've described, several times in our conversations, this seemed to me, and seems to me still to this day, a very wonderful, practical way of looking at life. If I can be present in each moment and release limitations, then I can come from my inspiration, my imagination, and I can expand and experience and live what I also came to find out was a life of joy. We are mostly in the frame of mind on the planet, culturally, every culture, life is a struggle. We've been survival based. We've been so separate from our source of love, so separate from each other, so hoarding and protecting and justifying and conquering all of our natures, our inner nature, our outer nature, nature itself, metaphorically speaking, the nature of others. We have become so disconnected from who we are, grand, magnificent beings that we are, that I guess it shouldn't be a surprise to us. We've gotten ourselves into this chaotic, messy soup of all these possibilities. And it's in this realm, it is often very difficult to find that peace that speaks to us, that sings to us, that peace being love, that part of us that we already are, that part of us that we have been seeking in the external only to find out that it resides right within us, right in the very center of our being. It is who we are. We are these spiritual beings having a human experience. And the spiritual nature of us is love. It's interconnected and interdependent. It is recognizing the wholeness, the big, broad picture. So unconditional love as an unlimited way of being kind of encapsulates this potential without defining what it is. Because as I've said so often, it's not up to me to define this. And it perhaps isn't even up to the next person to define it. It's for each of us to experience life with an unlimited perspective, in unlimited solutions, and moving forward as a creative being rather than moving forward from a past way of living in survival and base, justification and projecting our personality. And survival isn't even necessarily, in this sense, talking about just, do we have food, clothing, and shelter? Survival can be with those that have extraordinary, say, wealth and so-called status, or what they perceive as status in life, and yet they're struggling to survive in their cultural definition. They're struggling to survive in their cultural counterparts and their position in society. And, in many cases, they may be struggling far more severely because they've surrounded themselves with a lot of false images of what they think they are. And whereas somebody who's perhaps, just looking for the next meal doesn't have all those trappings. So it's all very relative to our individual experience. What is universal, though, is the nature of who we are. The love that's within us is in all of us. The smile that is within us is all of us. The laughter is in all of us. The crying is within all of us. These universal generalities, when we can tune into that bigger, broader picture, we get to tune into our potential at the same time. And that's why I feel it's so valuable and important to reflect and restore and reconnect people to their potential, because we are, again, not culturally teaching ourselves life skills. We're not reminding ourselves, one another, of our potential. We tend to be separating ourselves and from each other. Life is actually quite beautiful. I didn't know this. To me, life was a struggle prior to this unfolding, this awakening. And it didn't occur to me that struggle wasn't the only way. It occurred to me that struggle is what I was living. I didn't know anything else. And to me, it's like, that's what everybody says. The more you suffer, the greater the reward. And all these cliches that enter around. Until I woke up one day and realized, wait a minute, this is a really pretty awesome planet we live on. There's some really incredible things going on all the time. This is a really quite magnificent body that is carrying my consciousness around, that is doing all kinds of things without me having to think a moment, and knows how to make things happen that I couldn't conceive of doing, and certainly couldn't handle on an individual basis when there are trillions of things going on in my body every moment. Countless stars, billions of galaxies. I mean, just astonishing web of life. A truly outstanding, extraordinary experience going on in our world right now, right here. This is what's really happening. When we go beyond the boundaries, the walls, the expectations that we've been culturally indoctrinated with, there's also a lot of joy, a lot of peace, a lot of harmony on the planet. When we look at nature, there's joy in nature, there's harmony in nature, there's peace in nature. That's why we go to nature. When we live in an urban lifestyle, we go out into nature to connect with the joy and the harmony. When we live in a world where there is a lot of chaos, where there's a lot of preconceived suggestions of struggle, strain, strife, chaos, limitation, destruction, it isn't perhaps culturally acceptable to live in joy. And yet that is exactly what I chose to do. This notion of joy came into my world. It's like, I have a choice to live with struggle in my life every moment of every day, and I have a choice to live with joy in my heart in every moment of every day. And I actually decided to do it. I decided to make the commitment in my life, no matter what was going on, that I was going to live with joy in my heart, and that it didn't matter if other people around me were suffering intensely. I have a right to live in joy. They do too. They have the same identical choice always with themselves. And of course, I understand when the body's out of balance, when our emotions are running rampant, when our mind is fixated on something, it's often quite difficult to strive for balance. It's quite difficult to recognize joy when we are very consciously focused on struggle. But I chose it for myself, and I did it in a form of a meditation, which will discuss a little bit further in this conversation. But I did it in a meditation visualization where I actually saw two pathways, and I saw myself on a very dull, gray, uninspired, one foot in front of the other type of life. And right next to it was a pathway that was clearly labeled joy, that was very bright, was very joyful feeling. And I chose to step on it. And in that particular day, I made the commitment to myself that no matter what I faced, I was going to come from the standpoint of joy. Now, this is joy filled with enormous self-responsibility. This is not willy-nilly joy that goes off and does whatever it pleases. This is a very conscious joy. This is a joy from the heart, not a joy from the sensory experience. This is a joy from saying, I'm going to follow and pursue my heart. And in this process, I can certainly say a couple of decades later, having written 5 books and done TV and done all kinds of things and having international nonprofit, joy has actually served me quite well, and it has taught me quite a bit about myself and the world around me. It has taught me that if I can bring my joy into a very difficult situation, say with other people, joy helps uplift other people. Further negativity does not. That we do and are more profoundly impactful upon everyone and everything around us when we bring our joy into the world. And even as contrary as that may seem to those that are struggling, they actually appreciate interacting with and connecting with and having a sense of hope and joy in their midst, because it kind of pulls them out of the struggle and strain. You know, a bit of laughter when things are really difficult can make the whole experience so much lighter, so much easier, and so much more quickly remedied. So joy is a choice. It is something that we can choose for ourselves, and it is a pathway we can invoke for our own nature, even if those around us don't choose joy. They simply are unaware that it's possible. Perhaps by us choosing it, then we can encourage them to realize that life isn't this whatever's in front of us, a big struggle, strain, obstacle, difficulty. In fact, one of the words that I changed in this process too is I stopped looking at life as a struggle. And every time a problem came along, I didn't struggle with it. I started to look at it as a challenge. And the simple change of the vocabulary from struggle to challenge to then opportunity, because, you know, I needed probably a bridge, and challenge was like easier than struggle, because challenge was something I felt I could overcome. Struggle seemed like there was no overcoming it. It was just going to be an eternal struggle. Giving it the label of a challenge gave me the understanding that, oh, this is something that if I, you know, truly put myself into, I can overcome it. And that at least gave me some hope. Eventually, and over time, I started to look at what I now call challenges as opportunities, and where the opportunity now lightened it even easier, because now I looked at it as an activity that helped me grow, that helped me understand more of who I am.
Well, last time we were talking about aligning with the higher self and the wisdom of the higher self. I mean, is that how does that come through, really? How does that wisdom come into your mind? Is it through intuition or random thoughts, or what?
It's always there. We have to just simply be aware of it and perceive it. And in other words, be tuned into it. And I actually kind of laugh at myself when I think at the time that I went through this, I was aware of the notion of meditation, for example, early on. And I kind of fundamentally knew what it meant, but it was something like, you know, I was living a busy life. I had lots of things that I needed to attend to, and meditation just wasn't something I thought I needed to give my attention to. And yet when I did, even briefly initially, and I think partially, you know, as I look back upon it, part of why I resisted it is because that which I knew of meditation seemed to be its own effort, and it seemed to have its own need to connect to some outrageous goal. It needed to have some kind of deep, transformative, transcendent inspiration, or it wasn't true meditation. You know, because for those that have meditated, they often report back these really profound experiences. And so I think that was such an overwhelming prospect to my very rigid, real, linear life that, you know, the idea of how do I get that when I can barely get past, you know, what I'm doing. I ignored it or pushed it away for a while, but when I actually started doing, when I started to take the labels off and said, well, let me just sit here and be quiet with myself for a few minutes today. And I found like, wow, that was really kind of nice. I kind of enjoyed not having to think about anything, literally just let go. I didn't have to have a mantra. I didn't have to breathe. I didn't have to do anything. Just simply didn't have to do anything. And I gave myself that space to do it. Well, of course, then that encouraged me to do it again and again and again. And what I found is over time that in the stillness of me, when I could let go of my focus on my physical body, my emotional body, my mental body, and really even any connotation of what my spiritual body might be, and I simply just allowed myself to relax, that form of meditation started to bring through all kinds of new ideas in ways that I didn't even understand. Now I understand that I simply was quieting my outer consciousness long enough for myself to tune into vast potentials. And in vast potentials, there were the right ones that were for me, that were the necessary next opportunities for me. And that, in fact, I would often even find in a brief meditation, in a brief stillness of myself, that something that I had perceived as, say, perhaps a problem in my life, and I just couldn't come up with any kind of solution, maybe not in the meditation, perhaps though in the next day, all of a sudden this idea would pop into my head. And I was like, well, I had never thought of that. And sure enough, that was exactly what I needed to know. That was the piece that was right for this particular circumstance. So meditation became much more important to me very quickly as a way to connect to that grandness of myself, which is a stillness, which is in a way a nothingness. And in fact, for me, unlike things that I had looked at, which kind of taught meditation, and I said, well, I don't know if that really felt right for me, I decided to do a meditation that had no rules. It didn't have any particular function, and that was something that actually worked well for me in the sense that I was able to simply be at peace. I knew how to relax my body, I knew how to still my emotions and quiet my mind. And sometimes that happened in 5 minutes, sometimes that happened in 45 minutes. Sometimes it didn't happen at all. But the more I let go of judging what the experience was supposed to be like, based on what I thought it was supposed to be like, the more I actually started to have the experience. In fact, fast forward a decade later, interestingly enough, the whole notion from the nonprofit that I started in 2000, the Love Foundation, actually came to me in a meditation. It simply popped into my mind at the end of about a 45-minute, very still, quiet meditation. And I had the instant awareness of this idea that had never come to me before, certainly not in any way that I knew of. And that was one of those moments where it was really, in its own way, transcendent, because it actually popped into my mind when I was being quiet. It wasn't something that showed up a day later or 2 days later as an answer to something that I was trying to understand, as a bigger picture. So meditation can actually be, and is actually, a wonderful way to connect. And perhaps even here, I know your own personal life has had quite a bit of meditation. Perhaps you could, share with the audience a little bit of your perspective of how meditation has helped you in this instance.
Well, the main meditation that I used to practice was transcendental meditation, and that's a process really of going beyond any thoughts. The objective is not to have thoughts. The objective is to settle down into a state of really pure being beyond any thoughts, but through doing that, align oneself with one's greater self. And then afterwards, when one comes back into daily life, to kind of bring back the wisdom of that and spontaneously really start living in accordance with that. It's they say in accordance with natural law. But more recently, I've practiced a meditation which does involve having thoughts, and it involves really allowing the mind to settle down enough for thoughts to come through on specific topics. So I may decide what I want to have thoughts about, and then just sit and allow the thoughts to come into my mind without me consciously trying to work out the answers, but to allow the thoughts to come. And I do find it's very effective, and I use it now as a tool to do just that, what you've been saying, and I like to do it quite regularly because it's very useful. And I had another technique as well, which was called, the informal name was muscle testing, or kinesiology is the proper name, where I was able to access the body energy to provide positive or negative reactions to particular thoughts or questions. So I've got quite a lot of experience of delving into the deeper self and finding how useful it is. So from my experience, I completely endorse what you're saying.
Well, and you bring up a couple of great points because, prior to meditation and what we tend to do when we're not in meditation is we have associative thinking. Most of our thoughts associate with other thoughts we've already had and other experiences we've already had. And one of the things that meditation allows us to do is to let go of the thinking process. Because when we let go of the associative thought, that's when we get inspired thought, which is exactly what you're saying. And yes, the next step, I too have done the very same thing that you're speaking of, where you can actually go in with, in a way, the perspective, the notion, the intention of saying, I'd like to understand a very specific aspect or a piece of information that I'd like to have greater awareness to. And in meditation, we can take that intention in, and rather than trying to have associative thought and trying to find that solution through our mind, it's actually stilling the mind, stilling the feeling, stilling the physical body, while keeping kind of an intention, somewhat of a singular intention of what we'd like to have an answer to. And in meditation, we can more quickly bring that answer to us, or simply get perhaps maybe the next step that will lead us very quickly to an answer. So yes, I do that particular aspect too. And I think it's an evolution from the initial meditation, because what we all can benefit from initially, and certainly I did, was to just simply learn how to still myself, how to take a few minutes out of my life and simply do nothing. Because what I found, and I can say that, the next step of the two we just mentioned, there's also visualization, which is where we can actually go in and kind of guide ourselves through a whole imaginative opportunity where we can imagine potentials and kind of work out each potential in more or less in every kind of detail, and then work out another imaginative potential and another one, and then we can figure out which one is brightest. Like, if I do this, what happens? If I do that, what happens? If I do something else, what happens? And in visualizing, using the power of our imagination, we can actually find the one that is brightest, or shall we say the one that resonates, or the one that sings to us. And then we can, if we don't limit ourselves, if we're not afraid of taking that choice, we might take a choice that would be very different than we would have done had we not actually played out each of the scenarios. And that's one of the beauties of our imagination. And it can be done more consciously, in a way as a technique or as a skill, and especially works well when we've learned to move beyond bringing our minds into, things. Because there's the value of meditation is really learning how to detach from our mental and emotional connections and even our physical connections, so that we can eventually develop how to bring in the conscious desire to bring about an understanding and or visualizing something in a way to actually help us look at options rather than just diving right into something just because our inertia, our momentum is so strong in one direction that we don't stop to take a deep breath to say, wait a minute, is this what I really want? Is this my preference? Which we'll also talk about in this conversation. What I can say, and I would imagine you could actually would concur with this, is that over the years of practicing and being and learning how to still myself on so many different ways, that stilling myself is a way to bring greater harmony. And even when I come out of meditation, I find myself more harmonious, more in balance, and less in the extremes, less in the polarities of the strength of the duality that we tend to live in. Mm-hmm. Good and bad, positive, negative is kind of what I'm referring there. Is that I've learned by being present in the moment, by listening to my thoughts and feelings, knowing that I'm creating, by stilling that self to connect with my inner wisdom, that life itself is more of a walking meditation now. That I'm more present, more clear, more connected, more frequently in the present moment, that in this present moment I bring this stillness forth. And even in the moments where I start to notice my emotions to go rampant or my thoughts to get something, I've learned to take a deep breath. Because in fact, that's where meditation often comes, as initial, is to focus on our breath. Mm-hmm. Is that there are times where I can simply find myself in a situation that's not feeling very harmonious, and by taking a deep breath, I instantly invoke a spontaneous mini meditation. And in that mini meditation, I restore my harmony, I restore my balance, and I walk more in a meditative state, which is highly dynamic. I would say that people would think that, meditation, walking meditation is not walking around being a zombie and being completely detached from everything. It's quite the contrary. It's being very full and present. Mm-hmm. And being very full and present is being very interconnected, and we are then harmonious and interconnected with everything around us. So meditation has also evolved for me to be kind of a walking meditation in my everyday life.
Mm. Yeah, well, I completely agree with that, and for me, after the years of meditation, there's a constant stillness. There is a presence of stillness there all the time, and it's a great resource, and it's a great point of kind of a fulcrum for my life, really. So I'm not thrown easily, and I kind of like the analogy of drawing a bow back, if you're shooting an arrow, and at the point of greatest potential, there's a stillness, and then when you let go of the arrow, there's a tremendous force behind it. But that point of stillness is a very dynamic stillness, and a very powerful stillness, from which one's life really can be led and made more productive and harmonious as well.
Well, and as I mentioned, that the meditation part gets us out of associative thinking, which has served us well, but it also conjures up and brings up all our fears, our doubts, our worries, our guilt, our shames, and all the things I often say. And so associative thinking doesn't always provide inspired solution. Inspired solution is really something we've not experienced. It's coming from another level than what we've been experiencing. And I can also say that when we go into the learning to breathe and just being conscious of our breath, just like you mentioned in the example of the bow and arrow and pulling back, there's that moment of stillness. There's a moment of stillness between the in-breath and the out-breath. For one, most of us are not even conscious of our breath. We walk through life and we just assume that one breath comes to the next. Meditation helps us restore, because when we breathe, when we're conscious of breath, that's the moment we bring our attention into the physical now moment. Interestingly enough, when we're aware of our breathing, we're physical. We're also emotional, mental, and spiritual. We're all connected in this particular moment. So being consciously aware of our breath without trying to influence it makes us more present. Again, one of the benefits to meditation is being more present. And then when we actually learn to be aware of our breath, then we start to notice subtleties that we'd never noticed before. Just as you said, I'm sure there are plenty of people who have done archery for a lifetime and never thought about that still moment between pulling back and letting go. And it's the same in breath, is that between the in-breath and the out-breath is a space. There is an actual moment where there's absolute stillness, and in that void is the infinite possibilities. So those are the things that kind of happen as we move into greater understanding of the power of meditation, and that it really is, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15, 45, we don't need to be in meditation necessarily for 6 hours a day, although I know that there are plenty of people out there that do it. It's that, to be in this world and to be still and harmonious, and as you said, not being easily swayed. Well, when we are harmonious, when we're more still in our countenance and in the way we walk, as life is more of a meditation of love, then we are less apt to engage in, say, the extremes that are going on around us. We're more apt to stay in joy and less apt to buy into somebody else's struggle. We'll honor other people's choices with the compassionate detachment. We'll recognize that, the best thing that can serve them is to be a reminder of their full potential. And, when we're not in our full potential, when we are physically ailing or mentally or emotionally wounded, or, certainly coming from those places, we tend to lash out. We tend to act out in anger and hatred. And, we're detached from ourselves because we don't recognize our full potential. So it is my understanding and my recognition that the best thing I can do for those around me in these rather amazing moments on the planet is to be the very best I can be, very connected, harmonious, joyful person, because that will be the reminder of our universal potential. Speaking of the imbalances, one of the areas where we tend to feel the imbalances more frequently is in our physicalness. And it's interesting that in our physicalness, we can do things to make our physical body more harmonious, more in balance, and more at ease, in a way bringing an extrapolation of meditation into our physical body when we are out and about. And part of that comes from the recognizing of balance, like keeping this beautiful vessel healthy and alive, and not necessarily at so-called peak performance as we often are described, or what the perfect look is, or what the perfect strength is. It's about keeping our body healthy and harmonious, and then treating it with respect and honor and dignity, and giving it the proper nourishment, and giving it the proper exercise, and giving it the proper connection to release stresses. And because we are certainly faced with quite a few of stresses in all ways, shapes, and forms. I mean, we're in a century, and particularly in a time period right now where fast food convenience is extraordinarily easy to tune into. And yet, is fast food convenience a convenience when it actually is detrimental to our physicalness? When it actually adds to obesity, or adds to lethargy, or adds to uncomfortableness, or as we can go into recognizing what makes up, say, nutrition, for example. What is it we're eating? What are the sources of what are we eating, and where is it coming from? Is it natural? Is it light based? Is it filled with love and harmony and nutrition, or is it coming from sources that we're simply oblivious to? And thankfully, in the past decade alone, we've become much more aware of the connection of our nutrition to our physical well-being. What most people haven't necessarily done is taken it the next step. So, physical well-being adds to a mental and emotional well-being, which adds to a spiritual well-being. When any one of these bodies, one or more, is out of balance, it throws the others off. If we're not feeling good physically, we're feeling some ailment in our physical body, it's very difficult to keep our emotions and our mind at harmonious balance, because we become very focused and very uncomfortable. And then everything else kind of collapses, accordingly. So it does become valuable to our pathway as we live now, create now, is to be much more conscious of all of it. We're going to be conscious of all of it. We're going to be conscious of our minds, and what kinds of thoughts are we entertaining. We're going to be conscious of what types of feelings we're having. We're also want to understand that our body is a beautiful temple, as it were, a beautiful vessel, a beautiful vehicle that allows us to have these incredible experiences on the planet. So are we taking good care of our body? Are we bringing in and ingesting the best that is most appropriate for our body? Are we conscious of what we're eating? Are we conscious while we're eating? Are we just simply grabbing everything in sight? That was where I was prior to all this. I mean, I'm fascinated that in my own pathway, in the early years, the sheer volume of food that I consumed, and especially when I got into the business world, and there were business lunches and business breakfasts and business dinners, and sometimes all three in one day, 3 huge complete meals, and I just ate and ate and ate. And I was one of the fortunate ones that I didn't generally gain a tremendous amount of weight, but I did find that when I started to still myself, when I started to meditate, when I started to change the metabolic rate of my body, that I no longer felt the need for as much food. And the type of food that I was attracted to started to change. In my case, it became obvious for me that I wanted to be vegetarian, that I just simply didn't have an interest in meat anymore. So I went vegetarian, very quickly on. And I'm sure it was of many reasons, and due in part to the fact that I was no longer filled with stress and commotion and reaction to the outer world, that I was living more harmonious in my thoughts and my feelings. And as I quieted myself, I wasn't having these metabolical stretches. And I was also becoming very aware of the interactions of certain food substances, caffeines and acidic type foods, that my body wasn't functioning well with anymore. Well, I can say that my eating habits changed rather dramatically fairly quickly, and I can say that the volume of food probably was cut in half, and the quality of food was probably multiplied by a factor of 10, which I thought about years after that is, wasn't it interesting that if we take this understanding that, we're so focused on calorie intake that the more calories we take and the more fat we take in, the more we gain weight. If all things considered, that in of itself, the more the calories, if we don't burn them off, we end up, gaining weight. Well, here I had cut out tremendous numbers of calories and fat just by a few basic decisions to eat differently, and yet my weight stayed the same. It was very comfortable. It was very, very within a 5-pound range. And it made me very aware early on why diets themselves don't work, because it was also about body image. Their nutrition is part of everything else. We don't single out nutrition without recognizing the thoughts and feelings that go with it and the way we live our lifestyle. To make genuine change is to have a lifestyle change. And a diet is only a temporary activity. Even by its intention, it tends to be temporary. And it's to shift one particular aspect. Not that it's a wrong intention. It just doesn't have a life-sustaining view of it. So it made me aware of why diets come and go as fads, because they don't work for everybody all the time, and they tend to be very temporary in nature. It's when we make a lifestyle change, and certainly in my world, I made tremendous lifestyle changes by going from an outer focus in life to an inner focus in life. And I dove deep. I went in with, all of me and made it my life's desire to shift and change everything. So where I lived, how I ate, the way I thought, the way I dressed, simply every aspect of my life changed in this particular time period. And so for me, I may be somewhat unusual in the sense that I chose to make this extraordinary quantum leap and shift in my life. But from those changes, people can certainly get aspects of things that will benefit them, even if they don't make such a radical, tremendous shift. There's still certain proper wisdoms, balance and nutrition are one of them. Extremes of anything are its own version of an imbalance. So we want to strive for greater balance. So I walk regularly, I exercise, as regularly as I can, but I don't put the judgment. I don't look at myself from the standpoint of, how is this making me look? It's more of how is this bringing greater balance and harmony in my life? So nutrition and balance are necessary in living now and creating now, because it is a necessary process. It is who we are physically. And it is who our, where our emotional and mental bodies also gain their strength or not through our physicalness. And the more we can bring all of this into balance, and we've spoken so much of thought and feeling and spoken so much of our mental and emotional worlds, but we really need to address our physical world also, and creating, balance and harmony in that way. Meditation, balanced nutrition, these are the things that give us the very tools and techniques. And again, I think a lot of people will watch this and say, well, tell me what to do. It's not for me to tell anybody what to do. I would never even begin to think of that. Follow the heart. I followed my heart, and this got me in places that I never expected. And yet I'm far better off for it. I can even say that, over the years, by eating better and by even have mild regular exercise, simple stimulation, not extreme stimulation, my life has been much healthier. I was always very prone to colds early on, and strong colds, very rare. And generally I can tell when that comes on, it's because I've stressed myself out. I've allowed my mind to get too much in control, or I've not really paid attention. I haven't given myself the downtime necessary, the balance necessary. And then I realized that that's just my physical way of saying, okay, you need to create balance. So it does it in a different way. So my life is much more even, as it were. There's less curviness in my pathway, and that actually works for me. Other people want more extremes. They delight in the drama. And if you delight in the drama, then you take the choices that are appropriate. Mm-hmm. Just realize that there's a choice, and that we can actually live with greater balance, and we can come from our heart, and we can be more present, living now and creating now, which kind of gives us the opportunity to recognize, what is our preference? What is preference and opulence? If we have the abundant amount of food, the abundant amount of air, we have our breath, every breath we just assume the next breath is coming. We don't even think about it. The planet has all the resources, feed and clothe everyone. What do we really prefer in life? And if we weren't struggling, weren't trying to live our life on survival, we actually came from our personal strength and power, what's preference? And this is something that has evolved quite a bit for me over the years, because there was such a strong inertia and momentum originally coming from a Western culture, coming from an American culture, coming from the very materialistic culture, to thinking that my preferences were everything opulent in the outer material sense. And over the years, I found that all of these types of material things have lost their interest. I still appreciate and still enjoy opulent things. I'm not attached to them. And what I find is opulence can be in a beautiful sunrise, and it's totally free. Abundance can be in the bounty of friendship, and it too can be free. So I've kind of come to understand as preference and opulence and abundance as really things from the heart. Lots of love is far more interesting than the hollow material item that brings no joy once obtained. If we can bring our love and experience the opulent things in life, then everything's in harmony, everything's connected, and we can also share the same opulence and abundance. We're no longer attached to this is mine and that is yours, or I have and you do not. It has been a rather extraordinary transformation in my inner thinking over time, over the experiences, I should say, as opposed to saying it in linear. Is over my experiences, I've come to find that the world we live on is abundant. Infinite grains of sand, infinite air for us to breathe, countless leaves on the trees, all the resources. Well, go beyond the planet, billions of stars, billions of galaxies, trillions of stars. Look at our own body, changing and recycling every cell within a year. So the body we had last year is not this year's body, because every cell has died off and a new one has been replaced. There's an abundance of cells. In other words, there's an abundance of constant replenishment. When we tune into this grander part of ourselves, this holistic part of ourselves, this oneness of all that is, we no longer need to own everything. In fact, we know we don't own anything. We're just caretakers. We're stewards. We get to enjoy things in our life for the time that they're here. And nothing in our life is permanent. Our life is not permanent in that sense. Our physicalness in this planet is not permanent. The things we own are not permanent. The thing that is permanent, the thing that is always there, the thing that is always reliable is our love. And in fact, the love we have while we're on the planet continues long after our physicalness is gone. Because the love that we generated is shared amongst each other, and it amplifies and keeps going on beyond generations that we can even fathom. So the love is the constant. So now we can make choices by preference of love. From the heart, is this an experience I really want to have, or is this an experience I think I need to have to make me feel fulfilled? Well, it's not going to ultimately fulfill me, because love is the fulfilling piece. If I need to have the experience, go have the experience. Just know that I bring the love into it. And it has been such an extraordinary shift for me, because I have shifted my desires and my attentions to what is really important for me without having to go through all the material trappings. Because one of the things we know, historically, and we see it going on now, is that we can never satisfy the ego, the personality, the outer aspect, the part of us that is simply outwardly focused. There's never enough. There's, no matter, if we can obtain more money than that is even more important. And that's what we've seen, is that in separation of self, that's where greed comes in. That's where hoarding comes in. That's where we no longer recognize the interconnection, the interdependence, because we only see what we want more of. And what we're talking about is a very different perspective that is coming from the heart, that automatically recognizes that we're all in together, and that whatever we have is available for everyone, and that there's great joy in sharing, and there's no joy in hoarding. There's no joy in personal power if you don't have wisdom and love. If people need to have experiences to get to that point, then they'll have their experiences, but they will still come up empty, because the ephemeral external things, the physical things, are not permanent. They simply are not. So a person can build a mansion or 20 mansions. At some point, the mansion will go back to nothing. It will recycle back into the earth. So there's no permanence about that. Now, if they need to have that connection to something externally so that they feel more connected to themselves, seemingly, then they'll have the experience. But they will still perhaps walk around in the hallows of their mansion wondering, now what? What's next? Because they're not connected to themselves. Well, it goes in the other extreme too. When we're so disconnected to ourselves that we're constantly in survival mode, we're constantly looking externally for that which is within. In survival mode, if we trust and we know, we recognize our personal power, then we know we're always taken care of. And then in that opulence comes back. In that abundance comes back. We always know we're taken care of, so therefore it's always there. We no longer place our attention upon what's next because we're no longer externally focused. We're coming from our personal power. We're living now, creating now. Preference and opulence is something that is individual because it's also cultural. So, I can speak from a more Western view. Eastern philosophies would have a different view, and yet there's still preference and opulence engaged in all of these things, and it is something that we naturally explore as part of our unfolding and our awakening. And at the same time, it's also necessary to kind of ask ourselves the question, is this what I really prefer? Or is this something that I picked up along the way as a suggestion from someone else? This is now getting down to what do I prefer, what is my truth, versus what have I been culturally indoctrinated with or suggested to or feel like in order to fit in, I need these things. Well, maybe we don't. And I laugh at myself because in the old days when I was unawakened to myself, I fit in every way possible. As I've mentioned before in other conversations, wasn't very happy, but I did everything to fit in. The right car, the right suit, the right activity, the right career, the right friends. And now I could say that my life is so different because I'm choosing what I choose. I wear clothing, for example, that I'm attracted to, that I feel good in. It does not matter to me what anybody else thinks. It does not matter how other people see me. I live according to the way I feel is balanced and harmonious for me. In fact, one of the things that I brought into my life is a lot of color. So totally different than the way I was before, which was very neutral and very much fitting in. Now I enjoy wearing things with texture. I enjoy wearing things with color. I enjoy being more vibrant. And so it would make sense that my clothing would take on a vibrancy, a quality, an opulence. I tend to like opulent clothing or things that are inspired and inspiring because it really resonates with my vibration. I don't wear a suit, or uniform, because to me they kind of became one and the same. It's like you wear a uniform in this circumstance. To me, in the business world, a suit was a uniform. It was a culturally accepted way of looking at life, but it was only more of a Western culture. Other cultures didn't have this. So, of course, we need to be able to look broadly and then come from our heart and then choose what our preference is. And that will take extraordinary strength and courage because when we start to do things for ourselves that are filled with self-responsibility, yet still our truth, we don't always fit in. And when we don't always fit in, then we become an anomaly to those that are trying to fit in. And yet, ultimately, people will respect and honor the fact that we're coming from our truth, especially if we are coming from our truth. And we get to find our own unique essence in all this beautiful diversity rather than trying to fit in. And that is something that can be strange at first, and yet I've become very accustomed to being highly unique and highly diverse rather than trying to fit in, because that was like habit routine. It lost its familiarity with me. It lost its interest for me because I enjoy being more present now and having the fullness of the experience to the best of my ability now, rather than worrying about what I was yesterday or what I might be tomorrow, or projected who I think I should be right now. I just get to be me. Very, very different person than I was a time before. And it comes with, a whole new territory because I don't know who I'm going to be tomorrow. And that's kind of interesting to me. Before I could just see, 10 years down the road, I'm going to still be the same person. 20 years down the road, I'm going to be the same. Now I simply don't know. And I look forward to that not knowing because in that is infinite possibility. And I see what infinite possibility has done for me in the last 2 decades. Then I look forward to the fact that there's even more infinite ideas that I've yet to conceive of that I get to try and become to see how those experiences are. That's what living now, creating now exemplifies.
Mm-hmm. So it's a kind of a field of all possibilities that suddenly opens up. And I suppose for some people it might lead to moving out of the city and moving into the countryside and practice compassionate farming or something like that. And for other people perhaps staying in the city or even moving into the city and working for other people in some way, service to others, helping people in whatever way. But the key to it is the unconditional love, isn't it? And living from the heart, and then going where the heart takes you, really.
Well, and in that unconditional love, another truly fascinating. I don't know. You know, the words are not always there, but it could say a byproduct, but it really wasn't a byproduct. It's something that revealed itself as part of the pathway. Was this understanding of gratitude? Mm-hmm. I started to realize that every little moment, every little experience, every grand moment, every grand experience, the mere fact that I was alive each day was something that I can be grateful for. In fact, I found, you know, gratitude, we again, culturally, in all cultures, we're taught to thank, you know, one another for deeds and actions and gifts and these things. But, you know, who of us have become grateful for life itself? You know, a few people have had some transcendent, you know, near-death experiences and stuff. They often say that, you know, they wake up from that saying, oh my God, I'm so grateful for life, because they were so busy being and doing that they weren't aware of life itself. In this conscious path, we become aware of life itself, the eternal nature of life itself, the eternal nature of love itself. And interestingly, the unfolding also brings a sense of our heart opens, and we start to be grateful for everything and everyone. You know, the simple sunrise, the toothpaste on the toothbrush, the somewhat things that were habitual and routine and really, I mean, something that we looked at 1,000 times a day and never looked at. Now all of a sudden we're grateful. We're grateful for the leaves on the trees and the blades of grass that make things green, and, you know, all the wind that blows against our face. We just simply become grateful for all of it. We become grateful for the challenges, the opportunities. We become grateful for learning something about ourselves or another that we didn't know. We become grateful for the fact that we have breath, that we have ideas, that we have imagination. We become grateful for all these different intricacies, you know, labeled and not labeled, where gratitude almost in its own right becomes synonymous with unconditional love. Like in unconditional love is the sheer gratitude for life itself, the very essence of life itself. Gratitude then consciously generated, even when we, at moments where we don't feel grateful for, you know, experience or a challenge or something that you know, we confront, gratitude is in a way the quickest way to overcome, to resolve, to find solution. Because when we can look at something that we're not necessarily feeling gratitude, and we can generate that gratitude, we're really generating love. We're generating an unlimited perspective, and we're opening ourselves up to solution. And we can certainly look at our past. You know, we talk about forgiveness, you know, as a way to forgive the unhealed moments of our life, or the energies that we keep bringing forward from our past and dwelling on in the now. Gratitude is another form of forgiveness. It's another way to engage forgiveness, is we can look upon our past and simply be grateful for all of it. Mm-hmm. I say all of it. Underline all of it. Because all of it got us to where we are today. And where we are today is the springboard of all the potential of tomorrow, mm-hmm. all the potential of our future, all the potential of our multidimensional self, of who we can become, that connection to our higher self. Everything that we release in gratitude and forgiveness allows us greater freedom to be who we are now, which allows us greater freedom to explore new potentials. And when we're exploring new potentials, we're no longer repeating old experiences. And in new potentials, it's like everything is fresh and brand new, and it's a clean slate, and now we can imagine brand new opportunities that we'd never conceived of before. And that really relates to our greater nature. We are creative beings. Whether we're conscious of it or not, we are creative beings. It's one of the reasons why we have, you know, 7 billion people on the planet. And we have an explosion of not only people on the planet this past century, but an explosion of amazing technology and science and education and wisdom and spirituality and all these different things going on, because it's not just a product of all the people. It's the fact that there's so many more potentials, and people are tuning into greater potentials than they ever have before, creating a bit of chaos at the moment because it's all there. The old way and the new way and everything in between is all there. So we're kind of having to navigate these incredible changes. And yet, because we have new ideas and we see other people new ideas, we get ideas from those ideas, and it just keeps, compounding and expanding in such beautiful ways. Which kind of leaves us with this last bit of living now, creating now. We're here to have fun. Mm-hmm. And just like we started out with talking about joy, we have a right to joy, we have a right to fun. Fun may take on a different interpretation now with this grander awareness of loving unconditionally, because what a lot of people consider fun may, in fact, in a more conscious pathway, not necessarily be fun. And I liken that, I think of like people who want to go out and party and they love to get drunk into a stupor, and then they suffer for the next 2-3 days, with that. And that might be fun in the moment. It was never fun for me. And I've learned to find fun in, say, for example, meditating. I've learned to find fun and joy in a hike, in being with friends and enjoying a great expanding conversation, an unlimited conversation where we're talking about what is or what has been and saying, well, what about this? What about that? What about these potentials? What about those potentials? And really exploring how we can collaborate, how we can work together. That has become fun. Now, for other people that are still living in a limited life, competition is fun. That's extraordinary fun to them because they want to win. But there's no end to the winning, because at some point, the winning and only winning becomes hollow, whereas collaboration is where we all come together and we all share inspiration and we keep expanding and expanding. It's not one-sided. It's cumulative, and it's consensus, and it grows and it goes in directions we couldn't possibly imagine. So, people's definition of fun will come where their consciousness is. Yet, we have a right and ability to choose fun. We can look at life as creative beings, as spiritual beings having a human experience. What is fun for us? And it will evolve. It will change. It's changed and evolved for me, and I'm sure it will be very different. What I think is fun tomorrow may be very different than what I think it is today. But having fun is paramount in keeping a level of balance and harmony and sanity, especially when we're surrounded with so many different belief systems right now, so many traditions, so many suggestions, so much fear, so much doubt, so much hope, and so much potential. Maintaining a sense of laughter, a sense of joy, a sense of fun on our pathway will lighten up our pathway. And when we lighten up our pathway, we lighten up the pathway for everyone around us. We show people that it's okay to have fun, that we can dance and sing and have music, even in the greatest chaos and the greatest strife and the greatest troubles. We can come from joy. We can have fun. In fact, that's what we're here to do, because it is our eternal nature. It is our higher self. It is the angel within us. It's what we are. That's why we're here, is to experience all of it and take it all higher. To experience the extremes, the shadow side, the negative aspect, the positive side, the happiness, and then bring it all together as this whole big consciousness expansion. And we're in the very depths of that big consciousness expansion as we speak right now on this planet. So all the tools, all the techniques, all the possibilities are right within us, and it's being supported by all those around us, especially when we are conscious of our position in relationship to everything. So step on a pathway of joy, choose fun. It comes with its own responsibility, because we no longer are going to do things that hurt or harm ourselves or hurt or harm another, certainly not consciously. So we don't need to be concerned anymore about the old ways of living. When we lived in separation, we're now living in conscious connection. And so we're going to do the right thing. Trust the heart. The heart connects with all of it. It will not hurt or harm another being or another entity or another aspect of life. Become aligned with that heart, live now, create now, and we will create a very different world for ourselves.
And for other people.
And for other people.
And the more of us who do this, the more people will be affected. And I mean, I suppose in many ways, there are many opportunities for us to learn to become more aligned with our higher selves, aren't there? I mean, there are opportunities for us to become more compassionate towards one another, because we get to hear about other people's lives more and more these days with all the communications we have. We learn more about other people, and I suppose we all open ourselves up to the bigger picture progressively, don't we? I mean, would you say this is part of the whole process of development of consciousness we're going through at the moment?
Especially if we look over, say, the last few thousand years, and if we look at all the civilizations that have come and gone, and that more or less these civilizations, and certainly in the last few thousand years, there's been a natural kind of linear progression of consciousness, expanding one after another. And certainly some rough moments, some dark moments, and some brighter, lighter moments. But we've never seen anything like what we've been witnessing the past century. And certainly, I can say in my own life, nothing that I've witnessed in the past 2 decades, and even in the past 2 years. It's as if everything is on that exponential curve, as we know mathematically. Things expand at an expanding rate. So it's not like a simple curve. It goes very steeply up, and it grows faster and faster. And, using somewhat of a linear pattern or graphic or a 3D pattern, we're taking it and saying, let's go in all directions. So consciousness, in our sense, what we're talking about, it's not just a linear expansion of our mental machinations. It's our expansion of the heart, which we've really never seen to the depth and degree in such a large planetary society. So many people opening up to their heart at one time. I mean, 20 years in the scheme of millions of years is less than a blink of an eye. So these are extraordinary times, and it should be no surprise that there's quite a bit of chaos, because we're evolving and changing the very fabric of life itself, the very nature of how we view life. As I say again, the fundamental simplicity of, shall we say, a few hundred years ago, when people thought the planet was flat and that we would fall off the edge, or that the sun revolved around our planet, to a point where now we go off planet, we look back at our Earth, and when we look back at our Earth, we see this incredible, beautiful blue orb, and we see no boundaries, we see no limitations, we see no ego, we see no personality, we see no competition. We see one harmonious nature, one harmonious culture, one harmonious interactiveness. The more we come from that individually, the more we bring that consciousness into the very fabric of life on this planet and off planet. Our connection with everything else, there's connection everywhere. It really leads up very well to our final conversation, which is we the people, and labeled very specifically because the evolution that we've gone through in these conversations is understanding unconditional love, going within, aligning, expanding, living, being, and now going back out into the world with these new ideas, with these new potentials we aren't even aware of today, yet open to the fact that they may come tomorrow or the day after or a year from now. The more open we are to ideas and potentials, the more collaborative we are, the more we live wherever we are, the more we follow our heart, we the people make a profound difference. We, the individual part of we, makes a profound difference. We collectively, all the individuals together, make a truly extraordinary change. And we're doing it. We're doing it. We're moving in a more conscious way of expanding our understanding about our relationship to life. And I think very much so, it's my perspective, it's the love coming to the surface, the love in our heart, the natural state of our being, the spiritual self, realizing we're on a human experience and no longer seeking something externally that's already within. Extraordinarily profound shifts in what we would say paradigm shift of understanding. And so in a new paradigm, necessarily, we have a different foundation, and a different foundation creates a different reality. So that's how we will, end this and conclude this conversation, the series, in our next one, where we actually say and talk about the opportunities that are before us as individuals and as collective societies, and how we can actually and are making a change by the choice of our thought and feeling, and the choice to live in joy, and the choice to live with love, from my perspective, of course.
All right, well, look forward to that. Thanks very much.
Pleasure.